Hello, beautiful people. In today's episode, we dive into the story of KP. And KP is known online for building in public, for NoCode, and he's a really happy, positive guy that I'm so grateful to have spoken to. In this episode, we start with KP's origin story, and this actually came out after the episode was over, but I was still recording, thankfully, and we put this at the beginning of the episode so you can understand what KP has gone through to get into this situation. And it's an incredible, incredible story. If you don't listen to the full podcast, please listen to the first 10 minutes where he breaks down his story because it is incredible. If you are an American and you're listening, you probably will get a deep sense of pride for our country. And please listen to this first 10 minutes because it's incredible. In this episode, we went into NoCode, we went into his background, and I love the ways in which he used books like Atomic Habits to level up his life in an incredible way. We also went into his new job at OnDeck, and I am super grateful for this man. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed talking to KP. And if you enjoy it, let me know on Twitter at @HeyDannyMiranda. I love your feedback. I love to hear what you have to say about the episode. And let's get right to it, guys.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
I went to college in India too, actually. So I did my undergrad there, and 4 years after, I went to engineering school. 4 years after, I took the first job out of college, was in this neighboring state in South India. And it was just this like crappy computer job, right? It was just because I went to do electrical engineering, but the jobs that were only available at the time in India, 2010, were only like IT associate jobs. They were like very junior level. And I joined there and I was getting paid $300 a month. I was very unhappy because I was like, I felt like I knew that I deserved more from life and I could be a bigger person. I'm not growing here. This is just not it. And
this was in India?
This is India, yeah. In Chennai, South India. And I was like, I'm not learning anything here. 8 months was horrible, was hell. And I was like, I was trying to, figure out a way to give myself the best landing pad, the best stage ever. And I always had my eyes set on America, but not until I watched those 8 months and I was doing this horrible, like lifeless job in South India. I was binge watching TED Talks, and I was binge watching Steve Jobs' like talks, and especially the one around the Stanford commencement speech. And he talks about stay hungry, stay foolish, and the power of the dream and like all that stuff. And I was so inspired that, man, I need to get to America. I need to go to America. I don't know how. I'm going to build a company there. I'm going to be a founder in the US, the world's greatest stage ever. And I remember I borrowed money because each application for grad school here was $150, and my salary was $300. And I was like, there's no way I can apply for like more than 2. So I applied for 8 by borrowing money from my friends who were in the US at the time. I only had one friend. So just that friend, I called him, begged him, borrowed money to apply. And 7 universities denied me. But I kept writing emails to professors saying, like, I want to be a teaching assistant. Like, I'm ready to do anything. Like, please help me. Maybe like get me a half scholarship. Because we were like really poor. Like, there's no way I could afford $30,000 per year, in the US. Long story short, a similar miracle like OnDeck happened. 2011, I remember June 21st, I think, I got an email from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, in Tennessee. And they sent an email saying, KP, the faculty decided that they want to recommend you for grad school. and you get a 100% scholarship for your master's here at Vandy. And I was like, blown away.
Holy shit,
and
man.
Bonus, it gets better. The bonus is you get to be a TA from your day one, and you get because Vandy is rich. You'll get paid $1,100 a month as a TA. And I was like, what the? As a part-time TA, I was making $1,100 a month at Vandy. Meanwhile, my job in India, like full-time, like 6 days a week job, was $300. So that was my lift off, man. And that's where, 2011, the miracle happened, and I moved to the US and, never stopped falling in love with America.
Dude, your story just gave me chills on such a extreme level. You have no idea. That's fucking crazy. And I think I'm gonna put this in the podcast.
You should. I said, if it's going on, you should record it, put it in there. And I almost don't. I almost sort of don't bring it back in many of my conversations because it happened 9 years ago, right? But to me, it feels like a play-by-play. I remember every single moment of the scenes of that part of my life because it was like a miracle. It felt like a movie, felt like a film, and I was living it. And I'm like, I had to think to myself, this is happening. My family went crazy. Everybody were like, the guy who lent me money couldn't believe that I got that. He was like, no way, you're kidding me. And I'm like, dude, look at this email. So I forwarded that email. It was 2 a.m. in Pittsburgh where he was. And he didn't believe it. He was like, no way, this is real. This is probably like some like Nigerian scam or something. I'm like, no, look at it. It does says Vanderbilt.edu or .edu. So, man, it was a dream come true, moved to the US. But also, after I moved here, it wasn't like very easy. Like my goal was to get into tech, like I said, right? Like get into Silicon Valley, like startups. I had to wait 9 years since 2011 to 2020 for my next opening. And then this happened with OnDeck. And that's why I'm like extra proud. Meanwhile, I got married last year. My wife's American. So I have a lot of respect and love for this country. Especially it's funny because as I'm watching it now sort of crumble a little bit, I feel like this is sad to watch what's going on right now. But the American dream is still there. I just need more people like me to come out there and like say these stories out there to realize that, hey, look, this is America. This is what we do, right? This is the land of opportunity. So, anyway, so yeah.
Tell everyone just a little bit about yourself to give everyone a little taste for what they can expect from KP.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate you. Whatever you're doing with this podcast, I think we'll look back in maybe a year or 2 years down the line and say, wow, these were the beginnings, right? And I've listened to a couple other episodes too. The conversation on here is exciting. It's very curiosity driven, which is my favorite type of conversations. So I appreciate you having me here as a guest. Now, I'm KP. I live in Atlanta, and I've been here for the last 7 years, I think, 7 or 8. And I've been so it's interesting because, the last 7 years I've been working at corporate companies, Fortune 500 companies, and my day job was in product teams. But I was always like an idea guy, right? I always had these ideas in my pocket or in my Notion or journal, whatever. And I just sat on them. I really couldn't build anything because I was a non-technical, product guy, which meant I understood the product terminologies. I understood how ideas come to life, but I just didn't know how to build them. And I didn't know how to code. So it was frustrating, and it kept, I felt like over the time, it just kept getting harder and harder to ship anything. And I almost lost sort of my way in 2018 when I hit my rock bottom. And I came out of it thanks to a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he flipped the narrative. He completely flipped the narrative and made it all about systems and habits and less about this ambitious, grandiose goals. And October 2018, I picked up that book, finished the book, and decided that I'm going to be a maker, and I'm not going to be this fancy founder that I wanted to be, just a simple maker. Every single day, I'm going to get better 1%. And I discovered this beautiful thing called NoCode at the time, and just got on it. And it helped me build and ship products in public on Twitter, on Product Hunt and Indie Hackers. And in the course of the last 2 years, I went from no products shipped to 8. And the last 2 have been doing phenomenally well. And finally landed my dream job at a startup, just this last week, called OnDeck. So it's been a fun ride the last 2 years.
Wow, man. That is super cool to hear, and we'll definitely get to OnDeck in the future of this conversation. But what I want to jump to right away is that rock bottom. What was that rock bottom like? And if you don't mind going a little deeper on that, how you read Atomic Habits and you got out of it, but it was, I would love to hear more about that rock bottom.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it was basically, me being frustrated that I needed a technical co-founder or capital, or at the time I even needed a visa, like a startup visa, and all these like things that I couldn't control, and focusing and obsessing over those things rather than looking internally, taking a stock of my feelings and my thoughts and sitting down with them and then saying, okay, here's what I can control. Here's the daily habits I can control. Here's the mindset I can control. And here's the, peers that I can be part of and surround myself with, rather than, let this negative self-doubt, creep in. So it was really hard. It was really challenging. I remember taking a vacation to Florida. I remember, because I was after a B2B SaaS idea at the time called Closing Page, and it was a side project. It didn't take off ever, but it sort of got me circling around a lot, and I needed to go after CTOs and VCs and investors, and I think basically I did everything backwards. I didn't have leverage with the community. I didn't have a great compelling product or a problem. I just had an inkling of an idea, and I wanted to simply go after it because I was, because I just knew that was the only way. And I burn crashed, and I decided that, okay, maybe I'm going to put this founder identity on the attic for a while, and let me just go become a maker first.
It's really interesting how you separate in your mind the idea of a maker and a founder, because for me, I almost think of them as the same thing. But that's just my naive perspective. So explain to me the difference between a maker and a founder.
That's a great question. I think it's really just semantics. And it's if you can, as you can tell from my story, I needed to separate them out. Otherwise, I was going to go crazy, right? And being a founder comes with a load of burden. Like, it comes with expectations. It comes with trying to be like Mark Zuckerberg's or Kevin Systrom's, or you have to be the guy who's going to raise VC money, or you have to be the guy who's going to get revenue right away. And it comes with a lot of expectations. What's your product? What's your go-to-market? What's your pitch deck? And being a maker, on the other hand, gave me this epic creative freedom that I needed at the time. And it is also, you can be a solo maker. No one's going to bat an eye. You cannot be a solo founder and walk around, because everyone's going to think like you're sort of you're disabled or something. They're like, you have some problem, and that's sort of like our societal judgment, a little bit too. But long story short, I think being a maker just enabled me to explore the creative ideas that I had, and they didn't necessarily have to be ambitious. They didn't have to be like the next Netflix or the next Instagram or the next Loom. They just had to be slightly interesting and slightly useful for me and for others. And the more I got around to actually, building and launching such ideas, the stakes got bigger and bigger and bigger, where eventually, obviously I launched, startup level ideas in the last 6 months, but it didn't start that way. It was a very, very simple, humble beginning.
So let's talk about some of those those things that you've launched in the past 6 months, right? It seems like, from my perspective, that you were like launching something new every month. And I was like, what is going on with this guy? He's just constantly putting out new stuff. Like, you put out Build in Public and Cuppa and Letter Drop. And I'm like, where are these coming from? Where are these ideas coming from? How does this guy have the time to do this? This is incredible. And so talk about why you are so prolific in your creations. Like, how are you so prolific in putting out new things all the time? And what have you learned from doing that?
Right. Look, I think once I got a hang of this maker mindset and surrounded myself with the right kind of people who are also makers, who also, are prolific in their shipping cadence. They're finishers, they're shippers, they're doers, they're not talkers. All of that just like sets you up for success. I mean, I feel like the last 2 years, especially the last 1 year, I feel like I worked the least, hard, if there is such a thing. In fact, all my hard work was like, done prior. And like, I remember like doing, whiteboarding sessions until 3 a.m. in the night or 4 a.m. in the night and all that crap. But in the last 2 years, I really slept happily at like 11 p.m. And, of course, the launch days are different, but it felt much more, realistic and humbling and energizing in a way, because I didn't have to worry about societal expectations. I didn't have to worry about trying to make it in my first swing. No, the big thing that helped me be prolific is knowing that it is not just one big idea that I'm going to have or I'm going to go down this path. I'm going to be known as the guy who took multiple swings, right? Like the batting average. That is what's important to me than just one home run in the first shot. So I kept giving myself so many shots, so many chances to be in the bat, to keep swinging and swinging. And, this was intentional. This was by design. I keep saying this in many of my podcasts, where in October 2018, I clearly knew that my first product was going to be super simple and achievable, right? Very achievable. I built it in 5 days. And 6th day was on Hacker News homepage. I think in 2 weeks, it was on Product Hunt, #1 product of the day. Now, I was grateful that I got a lot of attention. It was great. It's called dothingsthatdon'tscale.com. But I also knew that was just, the first hit. And then I stepped back and I said, okay, what's my next one? So I raised the stakes slightly higher, but not too much. Not too much like a startup where I have to go raise money and all that, but slightly higher. And then I built something else and over and over and over. And the stakes got higher and higher. And the attention and the trust that I built with community and the leverage that came from just building in public just compounded. I think watching and listening to Naval's interviews with Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss really changed my life because he talks about compound interest a lot. And he talks about just finding something that you love doing, that you will forget time. It feels like play to you, but work to others. So I think making is one of those things for me.
Were you always that way? Or was this some sort of recent development in terms of viewing yourself as a maker and viewing yourself as someone who just wants to ship and does ship on a consistent basis? Is that a new development or I would say that I've always had ideas. My Notion document even now has 50 ideas that I haven't shipped. So I've always been an idea person. I've always been a creative, person growing up too. I grew up in India. I always colored beyond the dotted line. Like I always did more than what was classwork. I was extracurriculars. I was doing so many things. I'm just restless and curious as an individual. I get bored very easily. So I have to keep myself entertained with new, interesting ideas. Only recently, I've discovered finding ideas that also benefit others is massively satisfying. Not the ones that just benefit you, which is what I did for the longest part of my life, where I just kept going after ideas that were interesting just to me. But when you build them public, you kind of develop this this intuition where what is great for you, of course, but also what might work in
in public for people. And once you develop that sort of pulse check, gut check, and it gets even more interesting, because now you sort of can throw these ideas and see how to react to them, and then iterate and get better and better, right? So I think the last 2 years was my most creative and the most leveraged time of my life, especially because I learned that it takes intention, it takes habits. Talent is the table stakes. Like, it's basic shit. Like, everybody has talent, but it takes this intentionality and discipline to actually come out as a maker.
That's very interesting, and I 100% agree. And you've mentioned this idea of community a few times throughout so far, and I'm super curious about how you view building community and what are the most important aspects to someone who is trying to build a community, let's say, for a personal brand like me or you is trying to do.
Right. Well, community is the only moat that is left, right? I mean, talking in terms of, in the startup language, right, where defensibility, community is the only defensibility. Like, we live right now in this age of abundance where practically anything can be outsourced. Anything can be built. Like, literally, like, I know folks who are building sites like Airbnb, Instagram, Tinder in a few hours using NoCode. Not even code, using NoCode. So, like, back in the day, maybe 10, 15 years ago, code used to be leverage. Code used to be the moat, right? Like, if you knew how to code, if you could, like, sort of compound on your IP, creative IP, maybe, yes, that's leverage. That's how you sort of maintain your defensibility in this market and in the world. But now anybody can clone whatever you're building and doing, right? So it's no longer the moat. And capital used to be the moat for a long time, but now, in the first world country like America, capital is everywhere, right? So there's no longer this old school moats that exist. So the only true moat to me now is community. And that is basically people who trust you and who give you attention on a daily basis. That is the true leverage that you can have today, and it has to be earned. It is not given, and you will not get it because you're the son of someone or a daughter of someone, or you've done something in 1995. Doesn't matter. You have to be relevant in 2020 October today. What have you delivered? What value have you added to a particular niche or a particular set of people? That is the new community leverage.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you about this, absolutely, because, and this is the reason why I say to people who follow me on Twitter or who subscribe to my newsletter, Tuesday Treasure, you can find that at DannyMiranda.com. The reason why I do that, and I say to people who follow me everywhere, is like, you can call me on the phone, and I want to speak to you for 30 minutes, because one, it gives me insight into their brain, but two, it's building trust with them, right? That they could actually talk to me and that they could. So that's what it's all about, right? It's like making people care, and you make people care by caring about them.
Yes. So, I mean, that's the classic, how to be interesting, right? Be interested. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I wish I knew this shit when I was in college. I ran around, all the cool boys and girls thinking like, oh my God, how can I be cool? How can I be interesting? Like, little did I know, the hack is freaking be interested in people. Like, do the things that you want others to do unto you. Like, that's what it takes. And the more you actually practice it, it gets way easier. Like, you can be ultimately cool. Like, you can be the uber cool person if you care about, 20, 30, 40, 50 people on Twitter. And when they reach out to you and they have a question, when they have a particular, problem that is very easy for you to solve, just go fix it. Just go help them, right? Give first. And these are like, again, this sounds, again, cliche and like you've been around for the longest time. You have to genuinely come to them through your own experience to really see the value. And I feel like the last 2 years has helped me do that.
Yeah, well, it's cool to see you do it in practice and you practice what you're preaching in this moment. So I'm curious, who are some of the people that you look up to, or you've gotten this mindset from? You mentioned Naval, but I'm curious, are there any other people who you draw to for inspiration for some of these ideas?
Naval's played a massive role. I mean, I'd love to meet with him one day and just tell him thank you. That's all. I guess I could tweet at him, but yeah, it's been interesting. I think a lot of the thinkers now on Twitter. I mean, I read Paul Graham, I read James Clear, Seth Godin. I've been a fan for a long time. A lot of these prolific thinkers and sharers. If you notice, one thing that's common among all of these people is that they're incredible givers and sharers. Right? They're not holding this knowledge and insights to themselves. They're putting it out there into the world. In fact, in media, that is sort of very tricky to navigate. Like Twitter sometimes can be a cesspool, like especially when you're, celebrity or influencer. Like there's so much, noise that can come at you. But despite that, I feel like they're choosing to share their lessons and their insights, and I feel like I've benefited so much from that. So Naval's one. Let me think. Who else? James Clear is definitely. I think that book, Atomic Habits, has been like. I mean, cannot say how incredible it has been in my life. Completely owe a lot of my current success to that book, and I think Naval personally has sort of laid the foundation for this mindset that I'm talking about. That compound interest is what matters, and find your ikigai, find the thing that you love doing that other people would pay you for. Again, these are like timeless principles, right? I mean, I've been reading. I'm big on like self-development books, so I've been reading, a lot of that. I mean, right now the book I'm reading is Think and Grow Rich. Again, very cliche, but it's classic. I'm loving it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, Think and Grow Rich is a classic, and yeah, it's really interesting that these people will just put out this wisdom that is really so valuable. And if you just go through Naval's tweets, you go through the Almanac of Naval, or you go through Atomic Habits, it's like these books can really guide you in whatever avenue you're trying to do well in and you're trying to improve. And it's like the simplest and most profound wisdom isn't in some $10,000 package. It's really in the smallest books, the tweets, and the free information. And it's fascinating to see, really.
It is fascinating. It's quite ironic too, right? It's such a fun little thing. I mean, one of my other sort of, I try to like be as eclectic as possible in finding inspiration. Because I want to like go beyond tech in drawing inspiration. So I draw inspiration from sports. I'm a huge NBA fan. I'm a huge Steph Curry fan, and I love watching him because he reminds me of a kid at the basketball court. Like literally, he enjoys each step that he takes, each bucket that he makes. He genuinely stays in the present and enjoys the game. And I don't think there's anybody else who is a greater testimony of living in the moment and staying in the game, like every single play, and enjoying it and uplifting others too. Like you see, he's a great team player because he lifts other people up. And there's so many lessons to draw from like simple incidents like that.
When you can stay in the present moment, it allows you such freedom to do anything you want to do. Yeah. And it's so funny because I'll be having these conversations with people, and when I find myself going to the future or the next question or thinking about what I'm going to say when they're speaking, that's usually when we have worse conversations. When I'm listening to them fully, when I'm in the moment, that's when we have better conversations. And that's when it's probably better for the listener as well. So staying in the present moment is super important.
Right. I mean, so to sort of piggyback on that, so if you watch like some of the best Joe Rogan's sort of moments, I mean, that guy like literally stays in the present. Like he's in this goddamn present with that guest, with that person. And it's just fascinating to watch, because I watch I don't watch everything, but I try to keep up and catch up with some of the episodes. And I was replaying one of his episodes with Naval, and wow, that was such a brilliant conversation. And it went on for like 3 hours, and you forget time. And there were so many takeaways, so many mind-blowing moments. I had to pause, and it's sort of like soak in each and every highlight. I'm like, oh my God, what a powerful thing to say. What a great thing to say, So it's I feel like when you're literally in the moment, with that person who's next to you, virtually or physically, I think time slows down. And another amazing person, I never got to meet him or never got to find out about him until I moved to America, and who happens to be a great inspiration for me, is Mr. Rogers. It sounds a little silly saying that because I'm an adult who loves Mr. Rogers, but I caught up with his videos and his stuff in the last 2-3 years, really, and I'm 31, 32 at the time. But it spoke volumes to me about, what it is to be a kind and gentle man, and he was fascinating watching his YouTube videos. Well, now it's a thing now. If you go on YouTube and see Mr. Rogers, there's a whole, slew of his videos. He genuinely inspires me to focus on the present and focus on that one person with whom you are with in the moment. It could be a kid, it could be a friend, it could be the doorman, it could be a pizza man, it could be anybody. And it's fascinating what you can take away from him.
So I've never seen Mr. Rogers. Is that a TV show? Is that fictional? Is that nonfiction? I'm totally in the dark, and I know my parents listening are shaking their head at me.
Well, so I was just like you 2 years ago, so don't blame yourself. He it's a TV show. Apparently, it's a kids show. It was pretty big. It has been big since 1960s, is what I heard. And so he's done 40 years of public television shows for kids, to educate kids, empower kids, and talk to them about real life things, because most of the shows, most of the programming for kids is like cartoons or silly programs, and just it's all like silliness and a lot of non-serious topics. But he addressed some really powerful and profound topics like death or divorce or what it means to be bullied or be a bully, right? And fear. And so it's very mature content, very profound content, but addressed at kids. But it's funny because you can look at it and you're like, yeah, I'm 32. I'm taking these lessons from him.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of something Naval speaks about often, which is just that if you really understand something well, you should be able to explain it in the simplest way to a kid. Yeah. And so that idea that Mr. Rogers was able to put forth such wisdom to children that we recognize as wisdom shows how powerful and how well he understood those concepts.
Definitely. Can you imagine, I have a niece, shout out Carter. I have a little niece and she's 2.5, it's impossible to hold her attention for more than 2 seconds. Can you imagine explaining anything, to kids? Because they're just always feeding but they're also genuinely, they're in the moment, they're present. They're one of the things that I love to experiment with myself when I get a chance is force myself to be, as much as I can through the day with the child's mindset, with the beginner's mindset, with like a kid, with things that I love doing at least. There's of course other things like taxes, which are boring. You don't want to do them, but then there's things like making, building, for me, Twitter, podcasts, talking to people, hearing about their stories, all of that is play.
It's really interesting that you bring up children and making, and you put them in the same sentence, because I find that so true and find it so real, is that when we are creating something, whether it be a conversation, a piece of writing, a piece of software, if we're creating something, we almost feel as if we're a child in that moment. We forget about space and time and we just are doing. And that's super powerful.
Totally. And I wish more people, did that instead of trying to chase this, hypothetical VC game or startup game or whatever, like tech cloud, startup cloud, because that'll come to you eventually. You don't have to chase it. It'll come to you if you genuinely enjoy doing what you're doing and put out stuff that is valuable to others.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's change gears a little bit and talk about your new job, man. Congrats on your new job. I mean, by the time I post this, it'll be old news. But I mean, here we're recording in mid-October, so you've just got a new job by completely building in public. It seems like, and interviewing in public.
Interviewing in public. Accepting in public.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about this process, and also talk about this new job. I can't wait to hear about this.
Well, I think it's been a fun ride. I want to take full credit on how it happened and say I saw this coming, but definitely I was not prepared or predicting any of this would happen. I was just living in the moment, and I was genuinely surprised when it finally unfolded the way it did. But so the backstory for listeners who don't know what we're talking about here is early September, I put out a Twitter thread. In fact, I just got at the time, I was sort of feeling restless at my old job, and I just got my new visa where I can apply and work from anywhere. So that was sort of my prompt, and I thought, okay, maybe I'm going to write a thread about this and say that, hey, I want to work at a startup and specify exactly what I want in that job. And so I composed a thread, and I wrote, what I wanted. But the key thing that I think I did was I put proof of work in the thread. Like, there is a portfolio that I built of all these products we talked about so far, and I inserted that in the middle of my thread. And then I didn't even have a traditional resume, so I just put like a Notion document with all my projects. And very clearly at the beginning of the thread, I called out that this is a bad signal, and I want to work for an ambitious startup, early stage startup, and that has these following missions and blah, blah, blah. So I outlined exactly what I want. Like, it's almost like a tailor-cut, custom-made job description. Like, I made it very clear because I was thinking that, the odds of this happening are so low that I might as well just write what I want. Like, why should I just half-ass it? I'll just full-ass it. Like, let me literally write what I wanted. And it should be a remote company. It should be remote first. But I wanted to break into Silicon Valley, right? I live in Atlanta. I have friends in Silicon Valley, but I just never felt like an insider, and as being, like we talked about at the beginning, if you're a maker, you're really hanging out with different circles. You're in the indie hackers, and you're in the bootstrapper community a lot, but you're not really in the core of Silicon Valley. So my intention was very clear, and then I put that out there, and the thread blew up. That thread blew up. I got a lot of retweets and likes and DMs. I think within a week, I got, 6 incoming, a job interest, like, job sort of like job listings sort of things. Long story short, by October 2nd, I had received 13 inbound DMs with genuine job positions, and 6 of them were interviews that I succeeded in, and they were like, verbally okay with it. And 3 of them actually laid out my offers, and one of them happened to be OnDeck, and I accepted that in public. And OnDeck did a fun little twist at the end. Instead of just sending me the final offer, they put it on Twitter saying, we met KP through this process, and he's great at building in public. He's built all his products in public. Would he accept this job offer in public? And they laid out, the job name and all that, and it went viral. Everybody retweeted it, and the community showed up. Man, I was not expecting it. Like, so many people retweeted it, saying, KB, you should take this job. This is great for you, because it's in NoCode. And oh my God, it felt epic. It felt like a NBA recruitment move, and I accepted it. So,
well, what a story, and how incredible, man. And so I know there's going to be a few people listening who don't know what NoCode is, and I know we've mentioned it a few times. Just talk a little bit about what NoCode is for people who aren't familiar with that, so we could just get everyone on the same page.
Sure. So NoCode is, it's helping people who can't code, the traditional programmers and software developers, people who are not like them, like me, like Danny. I don't know if you're a programmer, Danny, but you could be a no-coder. Yeah,
not a
there
programmer.
We go. So, a lot of people who here's the stat that blows my mind. Somebody did this research. I think Webflow published this. There's only 0.3% of the world who are coders / programmers. So the rest of the world, like 99.7% of the world's software applications are being built by the 0.3%. That's crazy. So NoCode lets you build websites, landing pages, web apps, mobile apps, up until like full-fledged, like actual applications you can use with the help of like drag and drop tools, and products like Webflow and Bubble and Card. And the best way to describe them is, if you've ever used Canva, how Canva lets like even a non-designer design, like very sophisticated graphics and social media graphics. NoCode is similar to that, except it's drag and drop, and it's got a little bit of logic that you have to think about. It's almost like a puzzle, but it's very, very beginner friendly. So that's what it is.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And back to your job now. What are you doing exactly for OnDeck? What is the role that you've accepted as, and what are you looking forward to about it?
Glad you asked. So it's definitely in line with all that I've spoken so far, right? So this role is called, head of NoCode fellowship at OnDeck. So OnDeck currently is a 10-week cohort. They have fellowships. The main fellowship is 10 weeks of peer-to-peer learning and supercharged community, who are all, sort of holding each other accountable and helping each other out. And it's a give first community. So think of it like, the pitch line is they're kind of like the Silicon Valley on the cloud, or Stanford on the cloud, wherever, however you want to call it. So it's very learning driven. It's very skill driven. Like it's trying to upskill, if you, whatever skills you want to like level up. And it's very peer-to-peer, immersive learning driven. So OnDeck NoCode, which is the program that I'm going to lead in 2021, early in January, which by the time this podcast comes out, I think our landing page should be out. So check it out, Danny. Hopefully you can plug it in at the bottom.
Of course.
That is the program where we're inviting people who want to get into NoCode to come be part of this NoCode fellowship, right? So you could be a non-technical founder. You don't want to lose. You don't want to give up 50% of your company for a dev shop or a CTO who may or may not last with you for a long time. You can use NoCode and build your MVP prototypes and take it to market, and maybe even raise a pre-seed round. There have been stories who did that. Or you could be a maker like me, who's just curious, who's a hobbyist, who wanted to build things, and iterate until you finally discover your actual startup idea. NoCode's for you. Or you could be someone with a full-time job, and you're just building things to help, automate some of your monotonous, boring tasks at work. That's NoCode as well. So that's the goal, is to empower a lot of the beginners, a lot of the people who are getting into NoCode, level up.
Very cool, man. And it's fascinating because my brother is a programmer, and he has a knowledge and a skill set, but the thing is that you are providing the way for people to kind of allow themselves to get to his skills, or you're not giving them the skills of a coder, but you are giving them a path and a bridge to someone. So that is super fascinating and super cool.
And you may decide that you want to learn coding eventually, right? Then you can go to a coding boot camp or Lambda school. I mean, a lot of people say NoCode is the gateway drug to coding, and it could be if that's what you want, or it could be just a great resource for you to use, a great tool in your toolkit until you find a developer co-founder, right? So it's up to you how you want to use that skill.
Yeah, there's a lot of different paths that you could take with NoCode. So sounds cool.
Right.
I mean, I've personally never even heard of NoCode until you. I mean, I knew what it was entering this conversation, but before hearing of you and learning about your story, I didn't know what NoCode was. So you're basically the Trojan horse to NoCode.
Right. Well, I'd love to, sort of trade notes and, send some ideas your way and send some new tools your way, because there's so much innovation happening in this space. And my personal selfish view is that, like, as I saw the value as an outsider going into this 2 years ago, I want more and more people to come into it. It's almost like YouTube or podcasts, right? Like, people who are inside those fields and niches know how insanely valuable that is. But a lot of people don't even get into it because they're like, maybe it's not for me, or like, I don't even know what that is, right? So part of my role at OnDeck, self-appointed role that I'm appointing myself, is this evangelist for NoCode, and sort of spread the word about it.
You bring up such an interesting point, is that when we hear something new, oftentimes our initial indication, our initial perspective is like, that's weird, or we're closed off to it, right? Think about, the first time you heard about TikTok, or the first time you heard about podcasting, or you're like, what is that? Like, why would anyone do that? And we have a hard time grasping, right? That the open-minded nature. And so, that's happened to me so many times throughout my life, where now I hear something new, I'm like, oh, tell me more, because you realize that the thing that you once closed off to is something that can actually help you. And there's a reason why someone is saying how great it is, because it could probably help you.
Exactly. Yeah. Keeping that open mind, right? I mean, that's what keeps you young. I think keeping that curiosity alive and keeping that open mind. I was insanely curious about TikTok, and I kept noticing Ryan Hoover, I founded a Product Hunt, posting videos on Twitter from TikTok. And this is like way back in the day. And I was like, why is he doing that? Why is he posting interesting videos from TikTok onto Twitter? Because now it's actually a thing, right? Like, now everywhere we see on Twitter, you see a lot of TikTok videos posted. But when he did this back in the day, and I went to the app and I downloaded it, and I'm like, the first look looked so like, it's maybe for high schoolers, maybe not for me. And I passed on it. But then it was a rabbit hole, and I kept going back to it, and I generally put myself in a place where I understood what it does. Like, I'm like, oh, I see what it is. It's this endless loop of interesting videos. Well, whether you approve of them or not is secondary to the matter, right? Its point is, it is a great sort of product designed to keep your boredom away and keep it interesting all the time. And now, obviously, looking back, it was a hit from the beginning. Like, it was a long time coming, But yeah, and keeping that open mind and being curious is what leads more open doors.
Always. And so, switching gears a little bit, is you have at the time of this recording, you have a product that's available for pre-launch called An Open Guide to Going from 0 to 1,000 Early Signups for Your Products by Building in Public. So talk to me a little bit about this. What gave you the idea to do this, and what is this new product all about?
It was really driven by what I've been noticing in my DMs, in my tweets, mentions. people kept asking me. So after Kappa's launch and after Letterdrop's, launch, both of these products took off right off the gate. Like they were just landing pages when I first launched them. They didn't have a complete web app built. They didn't have any functionality built. They were just landing pages. And that's how I launch. I always launch the vision that I want to sort of showcase by making the landing page effective and communicating the story in an engaging way and just testing the waters, right? Because it's landing page is a low investment. And both of those took off, and I had for both of them I crossed 1,000 early signups, and I kept noticing people were asking like KP, because I was sharing my stats as part of the Build in Public movement, and people were like, KP, how do I get from 0 to 200? How do I get from 0 to 500? How do I get from 0 to 1,000 signups? And I noticed, wow, this is not natural. This is not everybody, like at launch they're getting 0 to 1,000 signups so easily. And I'm like, okay, so there needs to be some content around this. There needs to be some community, some education, some playbooks, sharing playbooks, and literally some transparency around this, because it's not rocket science. It is achievable. Of course, it's not easy, and it's not for every idea. Like, for example, some ideas may require, capping it at like 500 or 300, depending on your bandwidth or depending on what your app can do. But it's not rocket science. I've done it twice in the last 6 months, and I wanted to share that knowledge, with specific knowledge, with people. And I was curious about Gumroad, and a lot of my friends have Gumroad accounts, and they've built and sold Gumroad ebooks. So I just decided to share my playbooks. Really, it was not supposed to be a grand book. It was just a collection of my playbooks around these ideas: how to launch on Product Hunt, how to launch effectively on Indie Hackers, Product Hunt. And these are some bonus chapters I'm going to put in there, but it's about building an audience first. And the playbooks that I use to, do the launches right, and do the landing pages right, and do the community right, all of these flavors, they all add up.
It's really cool to see someone who's just living what they preach and then is able to teach others exactly how they did what they did. It's it's fascinating to see, and it's awesome, and it makes me super grateful to have this conversation, KP. And so before I let you go, can you please give the listeners of this podcast some parting pieces of wisdom? I would love to hear some wisdom dropped from KP to the listeners of the Danny Miranda podcast.
Well, let's see. Wisdom. Nothing short of wisdom will do, is it? Well, the mantra that I've been using is give yourself enough at-bats, right? And I think we're insanely harsh on ourselves, especially as adults. We forget that we learned how to walk by falling 10,000 times. We learned how to bike by, falling and failing and learning and getting up and then trying again. So as adults, when we try something new, especially in the creative professions, it is inevitable that we will fail. And I think there's this sense of discomfort around failure in many, many groups and many people that I've noticed that I think needs to be rethought and reimagined, from the fresh lens that, hey, failure is part of the journey. And it is exciting because it's giving you feedback. It's telling you this is not working, try the other door, and then you go to the other and then the other. So, but the way this is cheesy, but this is the way I've seen my failures. I call them lessons. I don't call them losses. I either have wins or lessons. There's no losses. And so, I wish this is something that I wish I kept in mind all the time. I do most of the time, but, every once in a while I slip and fail again, fall again, and then I have to get back up. And I wish this is something that especially a lot of the early stage beginner makers and founders keep this in mind, that it is completely okay to fail. You don't owe anybody anything, that you have to be successful on your first shot, right? A lot of people, you know, over time they become successful, but definitely not on the first and second swings. So keep swinging, keep having fun. And if you can find something that you truly love, that brings you to life, and figure out a way to monetize that, because then nobody can beat you. You're playing a single player game, and you will forever feel energized by whatever you're doing, no matter how many times you've tried it again.
Absolutely. Beautifully said, KP. Thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find you on the internet?
Well, people can find me at, for now, my current project is buildingpublic.xyz. So I'd love for folks to go check that out, because there's a ton of great content there, interviews, insights with the real doers, makers in the community. My personal Twitter, which is where I'll be most active, is at @thisiskp_. So feel free to say hello or drop by and send me a DM.
And those will all be in the show notes at dannymiranda.com/KP. Thank you again, KP, so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your knowledge. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Have a good one.
Hello, beautiful people. That was my interview with KP. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know on Twitter at HeyDannyMiranda. Love your feedback. As always, thank you for listening until the final seconds. See you guys in the next one.